Welcome to the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee. Today we have our CEO, Nate Pearson, with us. Nate, just you and I today. It's going to be a good one. Good times.
Woo-hoo.
The crew. I just got back from Steamboat Gravel. That I did not know how big that event was. Nate, there were over 3,000 people that raced it.
What?
I know.
didn't know that either.
Yeah, I didn't know it was that big. I knew it was big, there were over 1,000 people. I think with some DNFs, there weren't 1,000 that finished it, but over 1,000 people that raced the blue course or the 100-mile course like I did. 99 miles or 159 kilometers, climbed 7,568 feet. That's 2,306 meters. My race time was 5 hours, 35 minutes, 24 seconds. Normalized power was 215, average power 186, speed was 17.7 miles per hour or 28.5 kilometers per hour.
Wait. Where is this race? It's in Colorado?
Steamboat Springs, Colorado, which I'd never been there. Kind of a weird town.
What's it like?
If you mixed Park City with like Cowtown. Yeah, I don't know.
People don't know either of those things.
It's like a ski town that's also kind of like a weird mining town that's like a farming town that's a cowboy town. It's not what I expected at all, but it's really hilly terrain. Not like real big mountains, but really hilly terrain all around you. So it's not like the Colorado Rockies.
Has what do they have there? Vale?
Yeah, they're going to Aspen. Yeah.
There's Aspen and a mix between like what kind of movie? A Western kind of thing?
A Western, yeah, for sure. Butch Cassidy, I think, used to live around there. So yeah, Western fits really well. Mixed with like, I don't know. It's got a bit of Yellowstone look to it too, if you watch Yellowstone. So
all the non-Americans are like, what?
Yeah.
What? Like, I don't know any of these things.
They have no clue. But it was
beautiful.
hilly. Yeah, it was pretty for sure. Check that box. The race, by the way, the race was really well organized and everything else. I do think that they should have a separate women's start, which actually just announced yesterday that they're going to do from now on, to have a separate pro women's start. Thank goodness. Women deserve their own race. Which, by the way, this is all allegedly at this point. There's a lot of drama about that, and I understand why there was a lot of drama. Our course, the blue course, is 100 miles. The black course is 120 miles. We started on the same route, and then after like 15 miles, they branched off and did a bunch of other stuff, and then our courses rejoined from like mile 35 all the way to the end for us. It was probably around 55 for them. They started 2 hours earlier than us. We started at 8 a.m. That was the most awesome gravel race start ever, by the way, instead of starting at 6. That was really cool. But once we kind of merged in with a lot of the pro women. That's kind of like where our courses merged in, and they were all really upset. And I didn't know what they were upset about. And then afterward, after talking to athletes, then I got like the whole story. And allegedly, the racer that won the race, her husband carried her nutrition for her and drafted her the whole time. There's no rules against that, right? Yeah. There's no but ethically speaking, that's definitely like...
doesn't feel like a woman's race then if there's... Yeah, and not even that, but the drafting, right? There could be accidental drafting where you come in and you get swept up in a pack and you're like, now you're so far ahead than all the other women, and you get let's imagine like riding a gravel race with a peloton that's really fast. And some of the top amateur men are right at the same kind of level as the top pro women, right?
100%. Yeah. And a lot of the pro men are like, they're slow riding with the top pro women.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So there's a whole mix between there.
Yeah. So it's like whatever the winner did in this race, having her husband carry nutrition, that's the accusations that exist out there. It's just all of that would be avoided if they just had separate starts. And they announced that they're going to do that from here on out. Leadville was the one to make that plunge and to say, hey, we're going to do separate starts. That was really awesome. And Lifetime Grand Prix is just doing that now. And I think every race should. It was really cool.
What's the big deal? It would lower, like it would make it safer, like insurance costs of like claims and stuff. I don't know. Why would you not do it?
Well, take a step back here and think about pro road racing or cross-country mountain biking or even like marathon running. Like, let's step out of cycling. Imagine them saying, we're going to run the pro men or we're going to run the women and the men at the same time. Like, that would seem absurd to us, right? But because it just has not been that way in gravel, it's taking time, it feels like, to get to that.
I wonder if it's road closures and paying for police. Like sometimes... Sure. Because the police are expensive, right? And they're like, we can save a few $1,000s if we don't do it this way. That's an accusation that's probably not founded, but I'm just thinking about why wouldn't you just do it as two different starts?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think there was some drama with the race with that sort of thing, but the course was really cool. They call it the road champagne gravel out there, and I get it. Like, it's the smoothest gravel I've ridden. It was really cool. There was still like some rough stuff, and there were some rough sections for us on the blue course. The black course was a whole lot rougher, I heard. But yeah, anyways, I want to like get into this. So I had a TSS of 312 because my FTP right now is like 285. It's not very high, right? For me personally, I
just rolled my eyes on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Historically speaking, it's typically much higher than that. But that's just as much as I can do with what I have in life these days. So 312 TSS, that's a big day. That's a hard day right there. That's like more than my 6-week average TSS right now by, I think, 15. So that's a really big day.
Ouchie.
Yeah. But I want to go into things really, really quick with like some learning. So for the first 2 hours of the race, keep in mind my FTP is
at elevation. This is at 6,067, almost 7,000 feet, right?
That's where it starts.
That's like the average.
And then I think that we climbed up to 8,200. Yep.
Yeah. So then it'd even be more because your FTP would be air quotes lower. So the amount of work you'd have to do would be even more.
Correct. I think that compared to what I'm used to, my FTP would be about 5% lower at this race than what my training elevation, because my training elevation is 5,000 feet. And then this is, up from probably somewhere around an average for the course is somewhere around 7,000. So
about 800 meters higher than he would normally train.
Correct. Yep. So keeping that in mind, for the first 2 hours of the race, my normalized power was 245 watts. And my average was 215. It was rolling hills. It was punchy. And basically, if you were like climbing, because on these rolling hills, it was 320 to 400 watts just to be able to stay with the front group, right? And the front group was probably a group of like 70. So it was a really big group.
Why were you trying to stay with the front group?
Yeah, it's probably an unwise decision. But the reason that I wanted to do that was because of the course and because of the wind that was predicted with the course for the day. It wasn't a ton of wind, but it really seemed like it was going to be favorable toward the latter half of the race to be with people and to be with groups. Granted, there was 1,000 people on doing our race, and then we merged in with the black course, which was like another 1,000.
Yeah.
I didn't have to worry about it, right? I went out too hard. I settled within myself and let the front group go. In the midst of all of this. But then once we crested the top of the first climb, I then started to figure out, and this is like another point to cover, I then started to figure out the bike I was riding, and I started to learn how to descend on it and like its characteristics and everything else. And then I started to use that in my descending, and I started to catch a bunch of people. I may not be able to ride at really high intensity, but I can ride at like 220 watts kind of like all day is like what my body feels like these days. Like 200 to 220, I can just do that without end. So doing that on the like these false flat downhill sections, you can really carry a ton of speed, and we were able to get good rotations going with a handful of riders. And we ended up actually catching the front group, but it didn't change the fact that I wrote a check that was going to bounce, like it was 245 watts for the first 2 hours of this race that was going to be 5 hours long. Yeah, that's unsustainable. Right. It's way too
I'm
much.
just looking at your ride file now. Hopefully we can show it on the screen. The first little half that I selected, your normalized power on TrainerRoad was 237, and the second half was 185. There's some just big descents in there and stuff, but still, when you have a 50 watt swing from your first half to your second half, it's not the best pacing.
Yeah, we'll get into that. There's that would have happened regardless. There would have been a positive split to this one. Well, even terrain's dependent. I went out too hard, right?
Elevation too, but
yeah,
you got really high the second half.
This is true.
John's LDS, not that.
It's Colorado, man. Yeah. But yeah, so I was there with my friend Dan Cherkis, amazing guy, and their family, Elizabeth and Jack. And but I was racing with Dan, and I wanted to stick with Dan, and that'll get important later on. Dan dropped me in the beginning. He's really fast, and then he got blown out of the front group when we were kind of like carrying momentum and catching up to that front group. So he got absorbed into that. We all kind of merged in with the black course riders and those pro women and other really fast riders. And it was probably a group of like 100 or so. And it was big.
That's a huge peloton.
Yeah. And we're all kind of like, you get to this town called Hayden. And then from there it's this, and you'll see this on the profile on screen right now. It looks like just a really big climb, but what it feels like in reality is like 2 to 5% basically. But every once in a while, you'll have like a 10% roller, right? And then it just settles back into like 2 to 5% going up. And at that point, we started to have crosswinds, and it was a bit more challenging. And the gas, it was like somebody was driving in a car and they were just slowly going through the gears, right? And it was like, oop, they just clicked up another gear. Now we're going to go even faster. Clicked up another gear. Now we're going to, and everything just went single file. Then it exploded into pieces.
My thought of that is, if there's a 100-rider group and you're feeling pretty good at the front and hit those 10%ers, you want to kick everyone else out, right? So those 10%ers, you're going pretty hard. And then that is just burden matches every single time. And they may make 2 or 3 of those, but then 6, 7, 8.
Oh, yeah.
Your race is over then. Not your race is over, but you are destroyed because of the amount of anaerobic work that you're doing to try to get up those 10%ers.
Yes.
Like, if it was so much smarter, imagine all the people like the back 30, that first 10%, instead of like trying to stay with it, knowing that there's more of them, they just all went, hey, let's just ride at the same pace we were riding at. And they stayed together. They could probably catch part of the group later on.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't really looking at my power at first. I was just like, whoa, this is getting hard. So what I did, actually, I was kind of toward the back. I was actually very close to the back of that group. And I rolled straight up to the front in a spot where a roller kind of decreased and it was kind of false flat. And I just carried my effort and carried some momentum on the shaded side from the wind, the lee side, right? So the wind wasn't hitting me. And I rolled almost all the way up to the front. That's where I saw like the Muller V guys and some of like an Andrew Dewar and some like really fit riders. And I like settled in with them to intentionally allow myself to drift back through that really big pack because I knew that like I didn't want to go that hard on those rollers. But it was 350 to 450 watts up every roller. And at that point I was like, you know what? I'm just settling into my pace and I'm just going to ride my pace and that's going to be what it is. Everyone's going to blow apart from this. It's way too much.
How long is it? A gravel road or is it a single track or? It's
gravel.
Pretty wide.
It wasn't any. Yeah, and they're super wide. The gravel roads here are just like, they're like 2.5, 3 lane wide.
This is really good tactics thing, I think, that you just mentioned. So it's a 100-person peloton, right? Mm-hmm. And you said you're on the lee side. When are you not on the lee side? Because you're Jonathan Lee.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
That was a good dad joke.
That's a good dad joke.
Yeah.
Sorry. Last name's Lee. You couldn't let it slide. So when you're up there, he's coming up on the side. There's no wind, so it's easier to come up, and it's like a 2%. You said 2 to 3, 4%.
Yeah, it was probably between 2 and flat in that short section. You just hit a roller, and I was like, that was really hard. And then I was like, I need to get forward to allow myself to drift.
Okay. So how long is the peloton? You think? Like a football field?
Yeah, probably. It's really long. Yeah.
So imagine now, Jonathan then lightly pedals up just a little bit more. Instead of doing 220, he's doing 230 maybe. Passes everyone, gets to the front. And then when everyone jams it, he goes, I'm going to try to end up in last place. Therefore, making that climb, instead of taking a minute, it takes him a minute 30, right? And then that allows him to put out so much less power. We have a video on that of sag climbing, but for the podcast people, I forget what it's called. It's
sag climbing. I did it wrong. I think that's what it's called. We'll link to it.
I did it right on the worst one.
Yeah.
It's one of the ones. Right, it's like the first race that I won, 35 plus, where I soloed and I side climbed there. But basically, you can get the idea. You just start at the front and you drift back. And then also when you're in a road race and you do that, everyone thinks you're burned, right?
Yes, they do.
And you're like, and you're like looking around and you're just like, I can't do it. And I mean, you don't want to ham it up too much, but don't try to look super stoic at that point. Look like you're trying hard. Gravel race probably doesn't matter. There's 100 people, but when there's like 30 people in your peloton and they know you have a TrainerRoad jersey on, you just go, oh, this is hard. And that's the way. That helps so much.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Yeah, I felt like I just had to kind of be realistic. I looked down when we caught that group and everything else. I looked down and I was like, woo, 245. That's bad. Like, I need to recover. And then as soon as when things started to ratchet up like that, I was like, I just need to go back within myself and do that. And at that point, I was with Paige Onweller, a really fast pro woman, and Anna Hicks, another fast pro woman, and a couple others. And I just settled into kind of doing pulls with them, like we were rotating pulls, and we were just doing I was doing 220 to 240 was like my goal for the pull. And then after that, I would drop back in and I'd probably be at like 180 watts behind them. And the three of us were doing pulls. And it was a really good pace. Up the road, while we do that, we're just getting people blowing out of the front group.
I want to talk more about that because this, for everyone else. So you're pulling in a gravel race that's 5 hours long. And you're doing sweet spot on your pulls, right?
Yeah,
and then
tempo to sweet spot.
And you're going way into like endurance on that. Because I think a lot of people they think that they're going to pull, and it's like group ride pulling, and they go threshold or above. Point. Yeah, it's okay. 5 hours, it should be low sweet spot tempo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's that's such a good point. We caught up with a lot of groups, or like people would catch up with our group, and they'd go to the front, and then they'd be like throwing a monster pull. And it was when we were catching that front group early on, it was really cool. We had Dirk Friel was in our group, which was fun to ride cool. with Dirk. Yeah. Dirk was there. There were a handful of other riders. I think Jacob was your name. Forgive me, Jacob, if I'm remembering it wrong. And I think another guy named Corey, a few others. But y'all were super, super experienced. And we were all doing these pulls that just allowed a lot of preservation of momentum. We weren't killing it on the climbs. We were still just holding like a reasonable power level instead of a speed. And man, that's how we caught the front group. And actually looking back at our times through that section amongst the blue course people, it was the fastest times of the blue course people on that section. Then once we merged with the black course, we were actually like faster than, I was only like 2 seconds or something off of Keegan's time through a section through there. And it was because we were working so well together as a group, like it was really good riders. I'm sure Keegan wasn't going all out there. Which by the way, he ended up winning by 6 minutes, which is just nuts. Anyways, when we get into that situation and we're doing those pulls and we're doing it smooth, everything was good. And we were just sweeping people up. It was like D-Day was happening in front of us down the road. And it was just like people were popping out of that group looking.
It's been long enough to make that joke. I think so.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Good point, Nate. I'm sorry. Yeah. But it was bad. Like they were blowing out of there. And we had like 13 miles of climbing left. And it was going to be hot, and it was going to be steeper, and it was going to be really tough. So we're settling within ourselves. Some people would latch on for a bit, then they'd fall off. Those pro women are really fast. And then I saw my friend Dan looking completely dead, and we swept Dan up, and he was with us for a bit. Then he went to the front and tried to do a pull, and it was just nothing. It was like he had nothing in him.
I have another point about that. You think about an interval, like a TrainerRoad workout, something like P-Vine, where you're really doing low sweet spot intervals and you have rest. You can do that for so long. But the other added benefit is the eating and digesting and drinking is that when you're not going so hard, it's even easier to like handle. This sounds like an easy to handle on your bike, but to eat at a lower pace, especially that endurance, you think of your long, easy rides, so much nicer than a crit or something if you're trying to eat. If everyone would just work together, this is exactly what I talked about. You had a solid group of experienced riders. Dirk Friel, who people don't know, that is Joe Friel's son. I think he was a Colorado State crit champion like many, many years ago, but amazing
many
athlete.
Times over. He's incredible.
Amazing person too, like knows so much about sport, very accomplished racer. You have that like kind of, you know what you're doing too, John, but you have that kind of wisdom in there. And that kind of, when I've seen that before too, everyone kind of ships up, right? Like they fall in line, and then that peloton is so effective and efficient. I wonder if other people could kind of be that leader too. It takes a kind of, you can't yell at people to do it, right? I mean, that's not the right way to do it. You could, but I don't know. How does it happen?
I mean, like it's like you said, if everybody kind of knows what they're doing, it happens naturally. But then there are people that typically don't understand it. And in those cases, I usually just remind them like, hey, like let's go easy on the hills. Because that's usually the biggest problem. They either push too hard when they go to the front, or when they're on the front, they're just going too hard on the hills. And I just go easy on the hills, and then let's just keep the gas on when we get over the top of it and into the flat stuff. And it's hard for people to kind of figure that out, but then once they do, the speed goes up, and you can carry that speed for just so much longer. But it takes you doing it yourself. It's so much self-control, by the way, like when we go, this is something that's really important with TrainerRoad, and we'll get into this, right? And actually, we'll just get into it now. When you're building your training plan now, you can change your Saturday to be a group ride, or you can change it to be a solo ride. And when you do that, you'll be able to do your workouts. Adaptive Training will even suggest how to approach those based on what you were supposed to do with training. It's super cool. So it's not just the inside product, right? It's like you can train inside, you can train outside, you can add your group rides, you can add your solo rides, do all that stuff. But when I do my solo rides, it's so different from how most people do them. And the way that I do them is how I've seen the pros do them. And when I do it with them, we don't go out and just coast. We don't surge hard up hills. It's just like the same effort level all day. And we just aim to keep that going. Exactly right. Yeah. It's the same thing, right? Outside. Yeah. So it's like 180 to 200 watts may not seem like really like high power for somebody that has a big threshold. It may seem like, geez, that doesn't sound like that's not really a hard ride. But when you never let off that 180 to 200, that changes the game entirely. It's when you ride that 200, or if you go 240 up a climb, then you coast really long and you do that thing over and over. That builds a really different type of endurance. That muscular endurance that you get from just never letting off the gas. It's not putting out huge power, but just never letting off the gas is profound. Brings about a huge amount of aerobic adaptation when you're doing it for like 2 hours or longer like that. So this is why I think that when you ride like that, it teaches you how to pull on those pace lines because you moderate your effort based on the power you're doing, not the terrain you're doing. You're just always looking at that power, and then you're changing your speed. You're letting your speed be whatever it is, but you're holding your power. And that's like the key. And if you haven't done it, it will feel really odd. It feels like you're going too slow on climbs, and then it'll feel like everybody's going way too fast on flats. But in reality, you're just holding the same power, and it's really efficient to be able for your body even to operate that way. You know,
I think when I first started racing, I'd get in those groups and people I would expect to be in them. And I wanted to show them that I belonged here. So it was my turn. I'm going to get this group fast. I'm going to push them forward. And I, not knowingly, I was doing a horrible thing for the group. And people would tell me, I was like, what do you mean, I'm too strong? Like, why do I got to go slower? Like, you guys should go faster.
That's only helping your ego, right? So you're like, this is great. I'm too strong.
Yeah. But, I mean, looking back at it now, I understand it's like smooth is the way to go. And being on the other end of it, when you're really tired and someone goes really hard, it is awful. But so think about that. People accept you if you keep the pace the same. That's what we want. We don't want you to crank it up high.
Yes,
unless we tell you to go catch the person up ahead, then you just go crank it.
Yeah, exactly.
Go catch them and we'll just sit on your wheel. Yeah.
Nate, you talked about nutrition, and that was foreshadowing for sure. Dan had an even harder first half of the race because he was trying to stay with that front group for longer, everything else. And Dan's stomach had like flipped. And what I mean by flipped, you'll hear that term sometimes when people say like my stomach is flipped. And that's like, it's just, you feel sick, you can't take in anything, you don't want to take in anything, and your power is just stopped, and you've bonked effectively. Like
you throw up in your mouth. Oh, sorry. You throw up in your like mouth over and over again. Like when you burp, You're like, oh.
Yeah, and you can't take in anything. Like you try, but you can't take it in, and it's really tough. And so Dan was like struggling to be able to do 180 watts. I wanted to ride with Dan. At that point, Paige and Anna, I just waved goodbye, and Dan and I cruised together for the middle section of the race there. And that's where it really dropped down. I had a normalized power of 192 and then an average power of 165. And that was for the next 2 hours. Man, I saw so many of you, by the way, podcast listeners and TrainerRoad athletes. It was so cool. You all were amazing. And it was great, like cruising with Dan. That sort of camaraderie that you get when you're riding with your friend like that is really special. And that was something that I learned at Cape Epic with Brandon and I. Like, we had like good days and bad days, but we just stuck with each other. And it made it so that it was just an incredible experience. This is like the same thing that I had with Dan. It was super cool. And also to get to see a bunch of you, that was awesome. But then I screwed the whole thing up. We're going down like the rough descent portion. And I thought, I'm just kind of having fun. And I'm like, oh, I'm bored.
He's
dirt
gone.
bike guy.
He's
and
gone.
What's that?
I've been with you like this.
Yeah.
He's so far back.
So I'd see this line right here, these rain ruts and this really rough road. And what I'm going to try to do is kind of like hop from one to the next, then hop off. And it'll be like 2 doubles. And that's going to be super fun. And I screwed up the whole thing, landed on a rock and blew up my back tire. And I needed 4 tire plugs. Yeah.
Oh no.
4 tire plugs. And these are 2. So Dynaplug didn't crash, just blew out my rear tire like crazy. And I think there's some reasons that I want to go into that add to it, but it's my stupidity above all. That's what really caused it. So
could the reason be you were jumping between rain ruts on a gravel bike?
Yeah.
On a descent?
Trying to be
on
cute.
A rough road?
It was really dumb. Yeah, not smart. So I had to use 4
That's why you should
Dynaplug.
mountain bike. I'm sorry to interrupt you again. It's only the 2 of us. He said, like, I get bored. I should just be on the road. Or this is what he started doing.
Yeah.
He has ADHD on gravel. And he's like, I got to start making this interesting. It's like, maybe I should like fiddle with my bike with Dynaplugs. Let's do this. What is a Dynaplug so everyone knows?
Yeah, they're like tire plugs, but they're cool. They're the best ones in my opinion. I think they work way better than the other plugs that you have. Like the bacon strips are too small. The Stan's Dart is okay, but I think it's again too small. Dynaplug, they're closer to a traditional tire plug that you'd see for a tire, but it has a really sleek, it's really packaged well, and it makes it easy to be able to plug your tires. They typically have the Dynaplug Racer is the one I have on one side. It's got a skinny barb, and on the other side, it's got a fat barb. And I think I have had one flat in my life where I've used a flat bar or a fat barb. The other ones, it's always a skinny one. And for what it's worth, I thought about this. I haven't flatted in a race since 2019. So it's been a really long time. And I go over to the side, I look at it. It's got a hole right at the bead, which is the worst spot. And then it's got a hole on top. And I had to use 2 fat plugs and 2 skinny plugs. So I had to use 4 giant plugs effectively to be able to get my tire to seal. Took 10 minutes on the side of the road. Poor Dan was like stomach flipped, dying. He had just climbed like forever.
I would love that.
I mean, yeah, it was nice.
You actually get to sit down and like, hopefully there's some water, cold water.
Yeah. Well, and at that point though, I could tell he was just like, he just wanted to get the day over with, you know, but he was kind enough because I needed 4 tire plugs, and thank goodness I had Dan with me because he was able to give me 2 of those because my 2 I used. So like,
if I would Dan, I'd be like, you catch me later. Because seriously though, right? Because like
totally,
you would be able to catch him later, and especially if you're just kind of limping in.
And that's just it. After that, though, that's when things started to come alive. We had started stopping at aid stations. I was like, Dan, let's stop at this aid station. And I stopped. I dumped a bunch of water on him. He was able to get some Coke, and that really made his stomach feel really sick for a while, and he nearly puked. But then eventually he was able to come out from underneath it. And at that point, it started to go downhill at like -2 to 2%. Big, smooth gravel roads, wide open. And at that point, I was able to carry a bit more speed, and Dan was able to hold right on the wheel and stay in the draft. We stopped at another aid station. Dan started to come alive. And then we finished the last 90 minutes of the race strong. I had 201 NP and 189 average power. And to keep in mind on this one, it's like a really pedally descent. You're going from 8,200 feet down to 6,500 feet, but you're still climbing 1,600 feet within that. So it's like it's down, but you're still having some climbs within that. But man, we carried some really good pace. And
I want to go back to a little bit. 2 things. One, you kind of talked about this, but the Dynaplug, it just feels like, I don't know why, but it makes me want to take my tire protection. It feels really good, and like the Dart, which also works well, but it's like kind of plasticky and big, and it doesn't feel, I don't know. Stans, love you guys too, but the
Dynaplug is much more sleek.
Yeah, it just feels,
and it's
cool.
also way more robust. Yeah, it's way more robust. Like you said, I've broken a Dart.
Yeah.
But it's, marginally. It's
like 10 grams or something. Yeah.
I'm glad you went back to the flat because I want to cover some things that I think that setup wise could have changed it. Number one, inserts. I don't know why everybody doesn't run inserts. I wasn't running them. The reason I was on a loaner bike.
I don't know why anyone does. I wasn't running them.
I was on a loaner bike. I should have brought my inserts with me and then put them into these wheels that I'd be riding. But since they changed the course, I heard it was rougher, and no longer riding like a road bike with 35 mil tires would be okay. And instead, like you'd need 40s or above. I rode 40s. I had Maxxis receptors. They're kind of like a textured file tread. So it's like textured in the middle, and then they have like knobs on the edge.
Was it the right tire?
No, I would have gone for something way bigger. And I think it's just because of like,
how big?
I honestly would go for a mountain bike tire. As long as, and I know that a lot of people are going to be upset. Yeah. Well, there's the Aspen ST.
Everywhere. Aspen's everywhere.
Yeah. 2.25. It's
Jonathan actually tried to get them at Costco for his car the other day. It was crazy. It's like, do you guys have Aspen STs for a Tesla? Yeah.
Yeah. That's what Keegan was on. That's what Tobin was on. So Keegan's been doing a lot of testing on tires and stuff this year. We've been working together on a lot of this stuff, and we can't find scenarios. This sounds crazy, but we can't find many scenarios where a 2.4 Maxxis Aspen ST is slower than gravel file tread tires even. So, and I know that kind of blows people's minds because in our mind, we've always thought like fat is slow and like these big bulky tires.
What about high speed with aerodynamics?
That's the only spot is if you go like, well, I shouldn't reveal all these details, but yes, Nate, there is a point of diminishing returns with speed. There also is a point of diminishing returns with steepness. If it's steep and then it has to be paved, that's when it can become slower because you're dealing with a lot more rotational mass, I think. That's my assumption. I don't know why, but that's just what the data has shown us.
Because it's like your tires kind of doing these little mini accelerations over and over again when it's really steep.
But
with the pedal stroke, because it's not smooth, perfectly smooth. Yeah.
Yep, but if it's dirt and you're fighting for traction, everything else, they're faster. And if it's paved and it's flat, they still show as being equivalent in terms of speed, which is just nuts.
How's the flat protection on those?
It's not that great, but it's better than most gravel tires. So like there's not a lot of knob. So that basically means you just have kind of like the rounded tire, a lot of that exposed. And as a result, yeah, you have way less protection than something like a normal mountain bike tire that you would have.
So the difference with the T, you do the TS, right?
ST, yep. Yeah, Aspen ST.
Wait, there's the team spec. I'm confused. Yeah. There's one of 120 TPI and one 170. Are you using the 170?
I have the 170s and the 120s, and I would use the 170s. And with the larger tire and with the right rims, you wouldn't have pinch flats. And I've been running Envy, their prototype wheels. I think that they'll be coming out sometime soon. But Envy's been known for this for a long time on their mountain bike wheels. They designed the bead so that it doesn't pinch your tires when you have an impact like that. And I haven't had a pinch flat in forever, and because of running those. However, I wasn't running those this day, and I made the dumb choice, and I think I paid the price. If I had inserts, I think it would have helped.
I want to try to explain this, John. You let me know if I get this wrong, but the TPI is threads per inch, and your tire actually has some, like, the base of it are threads, and the closer those threads are, well, so they have the threads and they put the rubber in it, right? And different types of rubber, different spots. And the closer those threads are, the less rubber there is, but also the more flexible it is. So the more flexible means there's less rolling resistance. So like every time you deform your tire, it doesn't have so much energy to change the rubber, it's changing the threads. So you get a more, 100%. They call supple, right? So you can kind of move it really easily. And something like gravel, where you're probably not going to hit, hopefully, as long as you're not jumping rain ruts, hitting like rocks really hard, like this is the champagne of gravel courses, you'd really want a supple tire that has low rolling resistance.
Totally.
John, you explained though, the wider is the sidewall deforming. Is that why it's faster, lower rolling resistance than a skinnier tire?
I think so. I think there's less deformation. Like when you have a skinnier tire, and tire experts, if there's somebody, I know that Envy has done a ton of research into this. So maybe we get somebody from Envy, Maxxis or Schwalbe, or who knows, somebody, if you're listening to this, it'd be great to talk to you about this. But my assumption is that there's less casing tension when you have the bigger tire like that. It's like the tire has to deform a little bit less. And there's maybe less of it passed into those sidewalls. I don't know for sure, but that's my assumption. You're spot on though with the threads per inch, and that's why they're faster tires. But the one thing to keep in mind, I've noticed, is that every brand measures TPI differently. And I don't know if it's because they use different threads, and as a result, it's different, but it's really hard to keep track of.
Right. Because you want to, they might say like, oh, we're 300 and I don't know. No one's cutting it open too and looking. I don't know how you could even do that. So I want to talk about the sidewall for a second. If you think about, it's a rubber casing and look at your sidewall and think of it just straight up and down for a second. And if you have a really skinny tire and lower pressure, or I guess the pressure doesn't matter so much, but think about if there's weight on it, it's going to deform, almost make like a C, right? And that the more it bends, the more energy is going to come into that part of it. But if you have a wider tire and it gets squished, it's going to like, the C is going to be a little more open. And then that's going to be less of a bend. And that's what we're thinking is the reason why it has less rolling resistance. There's the aerodynamics issue, but really, I mean, this isn't road racing, right? You're not going that fast to really, it will have some matter, but I think the rolling resistance and the grip that helps too overcomes the rolling resistance. It's give and take, right, for everything.
Yeah, there were so many sections where I was just thinking I would be so much faster, less tense, and like relaxing more if I had mountain bike tires through here. Like if I had the tire setup that Tobin.
What about suspension?
Oh yeah, I think it would have been faster too, especially like now that I have Flight Attendant. They said on our podcast that it was roughly 2% faster is what they measured when they had people doing it manually versus people having Flight Attendant make the decisions for them. And they did this by like testing it on like a course, and they would do laps on the course and they would either have Flight Attendant on and off, right? And when I ride my Epic 8 and I ride it on gravel sort of terrain and I have Flight Attendant working for me, it is so fast. And I never have to worry about jarring bumps and loss of control and excess tension. In my opinion, that will be the future. All the gravel bikes, even the road bikes, will have like adaptive damping systems on them. Like it's just so much faster, you know?
I wish someone would have said this years ago. About how, I mean, what we need is an Epic with drop bars with Flight Attendant.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
With the STs on it. Like, as long as the geometry is correct to be in that position, like it would be so fast and amazing. I would feel so comfortable on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and I just want to call this out. Nate was in jest there, but that's exactly what Nate was talking about back in 2017, 2018, like way back when. And we've been talking
of bike spec stuff. Just because I'm so scared of things that, I want smooth and like dropper bars and stuff.
Yeah, totally. It's better.
People used to fight me on dropper posts. I'm sorry.
Oh, 100%.
They used to tell me that would. Yeah, people used to be like, "Oh, you learn how to ride a bike,"
and you're ruining the sport of cyclocross.
Yeah. Not just that. I mean, even like road and mountain bike too. Back then, like people on mountain bikes were like, "Oh, you don't need a dropper post. Like, just get behind your seat."
Yeah,
I physically couldn't. Like with my geometry, I could not get. I showed you that once. On like my arms and legs, it could not get behind my seat.
Yeah, I could do chin-ups on Nate's saddle. It's that high, right? Like, so yeah, it's a totally different deal. And the interesting thing is you see at the front end of the race, you see guys with big tires, you see guys with suspension, that sort of thing, at the very tip of the spear. Then you see the pros that aren't at the tip of the spear. They have the much more traditional, like faster looking road bike that actually in the end isn't faster. And then you go way back to the back of the pack and they actually kind of look like the pros with their setup. Like it's kind of funny.
Those are triathletes going into gravel and they don't care about tradition. We're just really like detail oriented.
Totally.
We want to be faster. And that's my heart and soul as a triathlete of the details. So tradition, long socks, all that stuff, not needed.
Yeah. And that last hour and a half though, man, it was really fun. Dan was coming alive again. So he was able to hold and I was able to roll like 220 watts, more or less, give or take a little bit. And at one point I looked back and I think that we had a group of like 40 on my wheel and I was fine to do it because I wasn't pushing super hard. Most of the people that we were with at that point were pretty gassed. You know, they had something go on in the day. We weren't toward the front of the spear or the race or anything. So it was really fun, like these like false flat downhill, fast rolling things and just carrying a huge amount of speed. It was rad. It was so much fun. And then, then we came into the finish and it was just a really I was super impressed by the event organization, SBT, Amy Charity and the rest of her crew and everything they do. It was top notch. Everything from the expo was next level good. Like it was very good. And I just want to applaud them on that race. That was really cool. And if you're looking for a gravel race, I've done a decent amount of gravel races, but typically West Coast stuff. And this was by far and away the best gravel experience I've had. It was very good. So if you're looking for nutrition,
you were
really
thinking
quick,
it was going to be boring for you.
And it was, to be honest, it was like it didn't satisfy everything for me, but there's a spectrum to be had here, right?
You didn't feel like you were going to die.
Yes, that's for sure. Yeah.
There's no risk of death. So John didn't really like it very much. I mean, you know what I mean though? Like
fair point.
For a lot of people, like what you're describing to me sounds like my ideal gravel race.
Yeah, totally.
How were the descents? Were you going like 60 miles per hour?
No, although I do think Keegan on one of them hit almost 60, I think in the race, which is pretty crazy.
Oh no, I'm thinking 34, 36. You hit one section at like 43, but it was very short. I would just hit my brakes. But these descents
and that was on
manageable
pavement,
too.
By the way. That was on pavement.
I could do that.
So yeah. I'm sure 30. It was. It might have been dirt, but I'm sure that was on pavement. I'm thinking of a specific section.
This is the beginning, close to the beginning.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so it's an awesome event. I want to go through nutrition really quick. I didn't end up using the Never Second stuff because I still have my leftover personal stuff. I want to go with what works. I think that's really important. That said, now I'm using all the Never Second stuff because again, I want to. If it makes life easier, I'm all for it.
Are you sponsored by Never Second?
Nope, not sponsored.
Yeah, cool.
Nope.
We just got to say that because some people are new and they think. Wait, are you sponsored by Aspens?
I'm not sponsored by anybody.
Specialized?
TrainerRoad. Nobody. TrainerRoad.
I know, because you have really strong opinions about some companies and equipment and stuff. And I don't think we talk about that enough, that John doesn't get it. So there are we do get some pro deals, but it's across the board of
correct.
Every company in the industry gives us that. We get the same discount everywhere.
That's right.
So we still can make a choice. But a lot of companies don't do it too. I don't think that's ever swayed us. Yeah.
And in some respects, I even get asked, I get asked to test products, and I have tested products. Like I mentioned, the NV wheels that I'm testing right now. That has no bearing. I chose NV wheels before that. That's those are my wheels of choice. I just like their stuff better until something better comes out, if it ever does. I just like the way they ride. And if it's anything that I'm ever testing or anything else like that, they usually have very strict requirements on what I can or cannot say about that. And that's understandable if you're testing a pre-production product. But then afterward, you can always trust that I'll share whatever my it's all honest opinions.
I know.
So.
When you say bad things about brands, like I cringe inside because I could just imagine being the other people. But like, as long as you're fair, that's like good. And you're always fair.
I think fairness is important. I don't think I'd ever bag on anybody as long as they're just not dishonest. Just don't be dishonest with people. That's the hard part. We get a lot of marketing fluff thrown at all of us in the bike world, and us at TrainerRoad, like we feel like, oh gosh, like I know, people are paying $22 a month to use TrainerRoad, but I feel like they're almost paying more in trust. So for us, it's like, it's so important for us to always like be transparent, fully honest, and to make sure that we would never compromise that. So I feel really personally like strongly about that specific principle, and that it should always be that way.
Yeah, especially when we're not getting any money for it.
Yeah, totally.
You get $100 off a bike or something, you're like,
yeah,
I'll say everything you want for it. Yeah, it's not the same.
Yeah. So I used all mix, no gels, and I used RunGum. I just cameled the race, meaning that I carried everything with me since we stopped at the aid stations.
I'm still going to ask you more questions. I got to be the color guy. RunGum, it's amazing. I have some in my garage that I haven't used for 3 years, but what is rum? We haven't talked about it for a while. So what is RunGum?
Yeah, I don't take in caffeine habitually. I don't avoid it, but I just don't take it in habitually. As a result, when I have caffeine, and it may just be that I'm naturally a very a strong response to caffeine, more perhaps than other people, a little bit of caffeine makes me really get wired. And what I've found is that if I take in a gel with like 75 milligrams of caffeine or something like that, when it goes through my gut, it tends to mess up how I'm taking in my food and like digestion. And then on top of that too, it really seems to like hit me really hard and then drop me off really hard. I tried RunGum because one of the things that they talked about was that it hits sooner, much smoother, and leaves you off much smoother as well. And that's absolutely what I've found to be the case. It's like basically like 50 milligrams of caffeine in a piece of gum. You chew it for like 15 minutes, then you can tell when the caffeine taste is gone, then you spit it out. And it's a way that I can feel like I get the impact from it very quickly, and then it doesn't mess up my digestion at all.
Or you spit in your pocket. But
yeah, you can spit in your pocket.
Yeah, too. So what it does is it gets absorbed through your mouth, right? So that you, rather than your stomach. Also,
faster
that brings
into the bloodstream.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool, is the ability to have little 50 milligram things in your pocket that give you something to stim if ADHD, like I get to do something on this race, is chew.
Yeah.
And you get like a little hit of caffeine. The other thing that Dan said that was interesting, when you said that his stomach was turned and then he had Coke and it turned even more. What I'm thinking there is acid reflux, and the acid in the Coke was it. And I wonder too if like those, I forget the name of them, but the chews that you can have, it's not sodium bicarbonate, but it's the, those kind of chews they do with acid reflux. If some of those would be good for someone who's prone to acid reflux, to have one of those on the course.
Yeah, it could be a really good idea to have those sort of tablets, because that could really help calm the gut. And that's a good, I want to try it. I don't ever want to be in that situation, but I want to try it.
I've suffered from acid reflux a lot. And that's the same thing happens, is that you start eating and it goes through, like the acid goes into your mouth and just nothing works. And it can get so bad. I've had it so bad once where water would cause me acid reflux.
Totally.
I took some Prilosec and a course of that of 2 weeks, and that really helped. And like maybe it comes back every 2 years or something, but yeah, I think that's the way to do it. So I had a USWE pack. That's like a hydration pack with a 2-liter bladder in it, and that was full. And then I had 2 1-liter bottles on my bike. In terms of what I took in, I drank some at aid stations, so I think it averages out to be. You're carrying 1-liter bottles now.
Yeah,
I tried to get you to carry 1-liter bottles for so long.
I know,
and you told me no. You don't need
what I saw when I watched TV was the pro riders just taking small bottles, to ignore the fact that they had a car carrying those bottles for them and everything. But, so I think I took in roughly around 850 milliliters of liquid. It wasn't that hot, but it also it wasn't a quote hot day, especially compared to like what they're enduring in the Vuelta of the recording of this podcast. But it was still felt plenty hot on the climbs, but it was really cool in the morning. So didn't sweat a ton, I didn't think. 850 milliliters of liquid. I probably could have taken in a bit more. I did 90 grams of carbs. Antibiotics recently have completely reset my gut, and it's been really tough to get back to the point where I could even tolerate 90 grams. So that's where I sat. Typically, I would have been higher. 800 milligrams of sodium is what I took in, roughly, also per hour, and then roughly 25 milligrams of caffeine over the course of the race per hour. So all that adds up to be a lot of caffeine and a lot of everything else. But again, with that RunGum, it doesn't seem to mess up the gut. I had no issues other than at the end, like I started to lose focus because I got so excited that we could roll coal and carry good pace and do that in the last 90 minutes. And I quit drinking from my hydration pack and I started to feel little twinges and cramps toward the end. Ooh. And then I was like, ooh, how much fluid do I have left? And then I just chugged the rest of my hydration pack that I had and the cramps went away after that. It took 5 minutes. When I look at it, it varies. The Garmin read at a high of like 92 on one of the climbs, which was hot. And it felt really hot. But I think the average temperature for the whole race was like 75 degrees Fahrenheit.
So what's on Celsius? It's beautiful. 24?
It's like 20s. Yeah, like mid-20s, low 20s. So pretty low.
It's 21, yeah. Beautiful. Side note, my 10-year-old son plays soccer, and he often gets a mini podcast in the car when I talk about nutrition, especially as we've learned that like soccer players don't have the same kind of nutrition. It's like a badge of honor not to do stuff. And so he comes to practice, little 62-pound guy with a liter Science and Sport water bottle with electrolytes and sugar in it. And but he'll drink the whole thing, right? And the other kids won't. And it'll be a hot day in Reno. And very proud of him for doing that, of taking it. Because too, it's what it is too, is it's different than the other kids' bottles, right? It's much bigger. What do you drink more water? But no, it's like, he's like, this is my advantage. I'm going to drink more and have more sugar during this thing. And he is an extremely skinny kid. There's no obesity issue. He needs the energy to go run and play for like a 2-hour practice.
This is a really great point. I was actually listening to a podcast the other day interviewing a team staff guy from one of the MLS teams here in the United States. And he was talking about how far behind soccer is in terms of sports science with nutrition, and how like for only in the past few years have they gotten to the point where they'll take a gel like mid-game. And he said, now I forget which team he was talking about, but he said the players actually carry gels with them in the game, and they'll sneak in, and they totally should. They should be taking per 45-minute half, they should be taking 2 to 3 gels. And that should be the way that it works all the time. It just makes sense,
I'm just getting to soccer. There's probably Europeans. There are Europeans that can answer this question. By the keeper, they keep like water bottles down there, and I've seen them. Can they put gels down there? Are there different bottles? Or like, is that bottle just for the keeper? Can anyone get those on the team?
That's a great question, actually. Yeah. Because this is something that's like an advantage for cycling that we take for granted. We have bottle cages in a bike, and then we have pockets. Whereas like even running, we've seen all the change now with ultra running over the past like 5 years, where hydration packs and everything has pockets now, and everything is designed to carry, because we're learning how important it is. Like, it's a huge game changer. Like for Dan, for that day, it was the thing that made it so that Dan would have finished like an hour ahead of me probably. He's so strong and so fast, but because of the gut issues, it didn't happen. So it's, nutrition's just key. It's everything.
Wouldn't it be funny if only the keeper could do it? The one person who's not like the person
who's not running.
Running they're still working, but not as much as like a striker or something.
Last bit of thing I want to go over is equipment really quick, and you can go to my Instagram and see where I break it down in detail. The bike that I built up from Service Course Swenson, just kind of putting things together. It was a size medium Stigmata. I'm 5'10". That's, I can't remember what I am in terms of centimeters. I think it's like 70 centimeters. If I was to like buy that bike, I would not ride the medium. I would ride a small. Yeah, there we go. There we are. Thanks, Nate. 178. I would ride a small, not a medium, even though I typically ride a medium. And the reason for that is I feel like the front end's a little high and the reach is a bit long, and I like a longer stem. In this case, I had a 100mm stem, and with how high the front end is, I would have wanted, and this is a -12, I would have wanted like a -17, 120mm stem on a size small to put more weight on the front tire to help the bike handle even better. That said, it's the best handling gravel bike I've ridden.
So it's a Santa Cruz bike. And Stigmata, that's an interesting choice for name of a bike. Right?
Yes, it is.
That's the crucifixion marks, right? Like,
indeed it is.
Isn't there like, what is it? Horror movies where people have the stigmata and like they're going to be taken over by a demon?
This is true. Yes, this is true. It is an interesting choice.
Why would you name a bike that?
I don't know. I had 38mm bars. Man, I run those. I've gotten really used to those MV SES Aero bars. I know there's other bars like it too, where it's like really narrow on the tops and then slightly wider on the drops, not crazy flare. And boy, I missed that because the drops kind of felt unusable on these ones. I didn't like them a whole lot. They were like a compact normal road bar.
You know, I've been getting way more into weight training, and it's the position. This is what my problem was. The position of your arms have so much to do with how much your traps are activated, and you want your traps not activated, because if your traps are activated, those things are going to fatigue, and then your head can't stay up. And I think for me, the wider bars actually activated my traps more, but probably for you, they didn't. Do you notice that same issue?
Yeah, like it's there's a right width for everybody's shoulders, I think, and you have to kind of find what it is. And I think that the big change is that everything is now set up so that your hoods are a bit more angled in. Because if you grab a towel and grip a towel, and then, sorry, I'm trying to reach around the microphone if you can see this, and then you were to take your hands, and if they're like flat and parallel to the ground in front of you, your fists, and then you were to rotate them so they're perpendicular, if you do that, it really adds a whole lot of tension into your traps and into everything into your back and shoulders. And we're rotating back now so that levers are flared in a bit more, bars are a bit more narrow. And when you do that, just like as you're trying to grip something, it really alleviates a whole lot from that upper back neck area. And it makes things way more comfortable for your wrists too. Some athletes really go crazy with it, and that may be what they need, but I really missed that fit. I had some really deep and wide wheels. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I've had a epiphany on this, and it might be totally wrong, but I don't think it's actually only the drops, the width of the bars, because what it is, it's the angle of your upper arm shoulder from your traps. Because when you hold the drops, the bend of your elbow, if you just imagine you're holding some bars in front of you right now and move your hands forward or back and see how that changes the angle of where your upper arm comes out of your shoulder, and now flare your elbows out a little bit or in. That's all going to change the way that your traps are activated. And if your drops are too, flaring your elbows down, if you do that, it's going to relax your traps, right? If your elbows go down. Totally. But if your drops are too low, you end up putting your elbows out, right?
Yes,
and then your traps are you're kind of shrugging your shoulders the whole time to keep yourself up. And I think, and then if you move them back and forth, there's even more changes. And I think it's a whole more complex relationship to that than just be like, you're a 44. Like they put they put the bars to your back and they go, you're a 44. And I think it's way more complicated than that. And I would try that with everyone of what I just said and see on the trainer, because it's perfect, what feels right. I bet a lot of people could have benefit if they raised it up and then had their elbows more down.
Yeah. I think I'm 37. Yes, I completely, good way to put it all into words, Nate. I think I'm 37 width on the tops and 40 on my drops with my desired bars. My hoods are rotated slightly inward. Oh, another thing, I was using the old SRAM red hoods, not the brand new ones that have recently come out. And the brand new ones are man, the ergonomics are way better. But even that, I have the in-between step of the SRAM Force ones, and I really missed having my hoods. They're a little bit longer and everything else. The old SRAM red ones were short and really tall, and the new ones are just great, and I missed them dreadfully. Deep and wide wheels I had from Reserve, and I'm sorry, but I can't talk about the details on those because I don't think that they're really products.
Fancy.
So
Jeez,
40
humble brag. I just have special equipment that can't talk about.
Well, if I'm honest, I grabbed them amidst a pile of these things and I didn't know that they were special.
You grabbed the wrong ones.
Informed later on that those are the really good ones. You grabbed the right ones, but they're very special. So 40C Maxxis receptors, like I talked about, 33 and 35 PSI. I know I got a pinch flat, but I wouldn't run higher pressure. That's for sure. I just would have ran an insert and I would have made not dumb decisions.
There's the one.
That would have helped. So,
you got it. You got on the third time.
Yeah. I had a 48 tooth 1x SRAM chainring. The Aero one looks super cool, by the way. Not that matters with anything else, but it does look cool.
On this course, 42 the right choice? Well, I guess it's
a 48.
48.
Yeah, well, I had a 1052 in the rear with SRAM transmission because that bike is UDH compatible, which having transmission on a gravel bike is so nice. It just shifts under load without any sweat, and it's awesome. I really liked it. So the 4852 for my watt kg was great. I never felt like I was, I really wish I had a lower gear. There was one climb that was probably 20-ish%. But at that point, I still felt like I could get up it okay. And then on the flats and everything else, there were a few times where I felt spun out with the 4852. So in my opinion, if you're somewhere around 4 watts per kilogram on this course, I would recommend having a 48 tooth chainring if you have a 52 in the rear. I think it worked out well. Yeah. And then I had a Silka wax chain on there and it lasted the whole race, which was great. No noise. And then I had 165 millimeter cranks. That was the first time I've ridden with 165s. And I think I'm going to switch to it across all my bikes.
I'm sorry, John. Wax chains.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if we were, maybe AI can do this later. I'd love to cut up all the times where John's like, no, a lot of this stuff happens in private too, where we tried so much, but honestly, a lot of times we waxed our own chains and we did a poor job and they would last for like 10 minutes and then be horrible. I think you fell on, go ahead.
There's a few things with this. So first of all, it is a hassle and I do not look forward to waxing that chain long term. And as a result, for my everyday driver, I'm going to have a race chain that I have that's waxed and set aside. And then for my everyday driver chain, I'm going to, because again, I've found that with SRAM transmission, the lube just doesn't last long. I don't know if it's tighter tolerances. I don't know if it's more strain on the chain, whatever it is, but it just doesn't seem to last long. We do live in an environment also here in Reno Tahoe where we have really complex, extremely fine, dusty dirt, like extremely fine. And then on top of that, you also have very big grit. And the combination of that seems to just tear lube and wax apart really quick, more so than in other situations. Yep. And it's just bone dry. So
hair dryer.
And I'm just planning on I'll wax a chain once, and after that I'll use Silka's lube, and then maybe once every 3 months or something I re-wax but it's a pain. I just want to be clear on that. For me personally, I think it's a pain and I don't like doing it.
It's a pain, but we have a room set up at the office with a crock pot with wax, with a dripping station where it's all over the floor. Can you imagine if you didn't have that set up at your house?
Now I bought the Silka setup. And they have, it's the same as if you're getting like a body hair removal wax little pot. They're a lot smaller. And they heat up really quick.
Actually, I have not bought one of those yet, but
okay, yeah. So but if you've seen them, you can go on Amazon and look at what they are. And then it's cool because you can dial in the temperature digitally. And then Silka has really specific things, like they say 75 degrees for a used chain is all you need to melt the wax and get the chain hot enough so that it works. If you get it too hot, then a lot of the time that wax will drain out too much when it is drying, and as a result, you won't get as good of a wax.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, because ours was really hot. And then it did feel like it gets so thin. It's like not viscous. It's just
correct,
like water.
Now you go to 125 degrees Celsius if you have a brand new chain that has all the waxy stuff on it, and you just throw that in with all the waxy stuff. You throw in their thing called the strip chip. And then what it does is it's a chemical that has a reaction with the wax that's on your chain, the really sticky stuff from the factory, and it actually converts that over to wax, which is really cool. So you don't even have to do any stripping. It's just done. You have to do that at 125 degrees at first, and then back it down to 75 degrees and let it sit for a while, because 75 is how you pull it out. Now, I have gotten an inside tip from the guys at Silka, and your mileage may vary. Test around with this, but I actually turn it off and let the wax congeal, just get to the point where it starts to just slightly congeal, and then I take my chain out. And what I did notice with that one, that was a tip that I was given when I did that, I felt like it lasted longer. So like a pro tip on waxing, I think that's a thing that I've found that does help. But and I ran that and it was silent throughout the race.
I have been so happy with Silka products. Josh,
they're really good. They're really good, man.
Very smart. And they can be more expensive, but I still I bought an Allen wrench set from them a long time, like, I don't know, 12 years ago, 10 years ago. And in my house, it's one of those ones you open up, it's a wooden box and each one has its own thing. I'd go over that over all the Home Depot stuff and everything. And they have not rounded, because when you round them, like everything, there's Allen wrenches everywhere that you need. But I just like the high quality. It just feels so nice, going back to the plugs before. So nice to have like a nice tool. I don't know something about it, but your tools
are where you shouldn't skimp, right?
It makes me feel like I'm wearing a tux when I'm fixing something, like very high quality.
Like their bike pump, for example, I was using their bike pump and I'm just like, geez, like they thought of everything. It's just I got every little detail.
Yeah. Yeah.
They do a really good job on their stuff. Again,
but it is expensive though. It's quality, but you got to pay for it. Like
the wax, for what it's worth,
you know what it is?
Not comparatively expensive. Like their wax is good. And then I've used Molten Speed Wax. It could just be me and my process, but I'm having much better results with the Silka stuff instead of the Molten Speed Wax. So
the Silka stuff, sometimes it'd be hard, especially for dads to find a present for them. But like a nice Allen wrench set, a nice tape measure for like bike stuff with centimeters. I always love the, what was that called? That board that I used to measure my, is it Abby Tools?
It is Abby Tools. Yeah. Abby Tools makes this like saddle device to be able to measure everything and keep it the same.
I love that thing. That also
they make
was
really
expensive.
good tools too. Very good tools.
Exactly. Yeah. But anyways, upgrading something like that of someone that already owns and you have it for like 30 years. That's a really cool present because you think of that person every time you use it too. And it never goes away. Yeah.
I think I'm going to switch to 165 millimeter cranks after riding them. I wanted to, but they're really hard to find. So
no way.
Or they have been. So I've always wanted shorter cranks. When I first started cycling, everyone was like nothing shorter than 175, and I was like, I want shorter. And I didn't know it then, but going through the whole process with my knee injuries, I've figured out that I do have hip sockets that are shaped differently than normal. And as a result, that's why I have like a lot of hip mobility issues that then have caused downstream issues with my knees. And I just do a lot of PT and it ends up working out and I can do it. But if you'll notice, if you ever ride with me or see a video, I rock on the saddle a little bit. And a lot of that is because of just the way that my hips are shaped. I thought that it was always because my saddle was too high or saddle was too low, and it doesn't matter. It's just the way it works. Payson's another person that has like, you'll see his hips rock, and I don't know if Payson has this, who knows, but sometimes it happens. But the problem that I've faced with that is that, especially if I'm in a more aggressive position, my hips don't like to allow a fuller range of motion, and having shorter cranks just made it much more comfortable. Like
it opens up the hip angle on the top, right? Because your knee doesn't go up as high.
Yeah. And if you think about it, you might think, oh, well, that's like really not that much. But if you think about my hips and one leg down, one leg up, it's a centimeter of difference that I'm dealing with, right? From 170 to 165, because one foot's 5 millimeters lower, one foot is 5 millimeters higher. And that is the sort of thing, a small amount, but it matters with the hip impingements that I've run into.
On that situation though, your saddle has to increase and your bars have to increase to get that benefit. Because if your saddle increases and your bars stay the same, it doesn't help. This isn't me calling something earlier, but I tried these in like 2010 is 165s because of my issues putting power out on the TT bike, but I couldn't get my bars high enough because I'm just a tall person. Like the saddle would go higher, but my bars couldn't go any higher. And it was actually worse for me because they would just, it was the same, you know what I mean? And I just enjoyed the 175s after that.
Yeah, it's and Tadej's famous for running, I think 165s or even 160s. He runs like really short cranks, and some people though, you talk to them and it just doesn't work, and some people it does. So I think
it's such an expensive like test too.
Well, you know what I mean? Like the hard thing is, how do you test that? Then after that, it's like, all right, sweet. So I have to buy new cranks because getting new crank arms for some bikes, it isn't possible. And then if it's a power meter, it's really complex and like. So it's like, okay, in the next handful of years when I run through and replace my bikes, I'll then switch it all over. So it's not an easy switch. It's not like saddles or something. So
yeah, imagine you have multiple bikes too. Oh
yeah.
Mountain biking, are you going to go 165? Because pedal strikes, that's a big deal.
And our bottom brackets are lower now on the newest breed of cross country bikes, so pedal strikes are more common. And yeah, absolutely. I think
makes the most sense to me.
That's another benefit with it too. So yeah, I think it'd be great. I used Velocio Radiator Pro jersey because I was worried that it would feel hot on the climbs. And then their concept bibs. I had a POC ventral air helmet, and then I also had these glasses. Everybody always asks me about them. I love them. It's the POC Propel. They're my favorite glasses I've used. They're amazing. They're really, they're supposed to be more aerodynamic. I have no clue if that's the case, that they actually are aerodynamically faster. But they are so good at not letting any air get to your eyes and stopping things like all the little rocks that which by the way, that's a different thing about gravel. You get pelted with rocks the whole time, and none of that stuff gets into your eyes with those.
And then I ran in your eyes. I'm sorry. I'm going to keep interrupting you. When the wind goes over your eyes and it dries out your eyes, I think it adds an extra bit of danger. And you can see, like, look at yourself at the end of a race. Some people's eyes, mine, completely red, and it's like hard to see.
Yeah. I love these things. They're really good. They use my
sorry,
road
John.
shoes. And you're
going through so fast, but I want to talk more about the 165s. There's nothing scarier there are scary. One of the most scary times is when you're riding a mountain bike and you think you're fine and you're jamming and you pedal strike. I did that at that race in Colorado, and it launches you. Like you hit that thing and suddenly it's like there's an explosion under your foot, and I crashed so hard, and then you're freaked out from pedaling, right? Because I was on maybe a 3% downhill grade, and it was, I don't know, it's so scary. So having that
you
extra
lose all
clearance,
confidence on the thing that you're doing. You're pedaling 90 times a minute, and suddenly the thing that you're doing 90 times a minute, you lose all confidence in it. And it came
out of nowhere too. You didn't think it was going to be there. Yikes. And some of that too is it's the suspension, right? It's like why you come down, you just got lowered and you didn't realize you got lower, and something you would normally be able to pedal over, because I think that's when it happens too, is when you're going downhill because your suspension is hitting. Yeah. Sorry.
It's another plug for flight attendant, by the way, is that like your effective bottom bracket height is probably going to be higher than it would otherwise, because it's going to have you in that middle position and locked out more often than you would otherwise. So in other words, your bottom bracket is effectively higher. Who cares what it says on the spec sheet? When you sag into your suspension, your bottom bracket is lower. And in this case, that middle section, at least on the Epic that I have, the Epic 8, it rides higher. So another plug for that. Yeah, and I used road shoes and pedals because I knew that I wouldn't have to walk on the blue course. The black course, I know that some people had to walk because it was so steep and tough. So, and I just love the feeling of being locked in with the road pedals. You feel way more stable than on the mountain bike pedals. So, yeah, that was it. I love seeing all of you out there. That was amazing. You guys are great. And thank you so much for taking your time to say hi to me after the race and during the race and everything else. It's just really cool to see you all. I think that this backs up the point where, like, even if I had settled into myself, like into my own pace, this race is a perfect example of a big, long day, but why interval training is so important with big rollers, with these sort of things that are just going to be hard and they are going to be tough. I know a lot of people are tempted, like, it's gravel. I just need to do really long, easy stuff, and then I'm fine because it's going to be a long day. This is like this course and this race is a perfect example of why this is why interval training is so key, because it's not just a single steady thing for that sort of course. It's going to be variable for sure.
Even if it was completely steady, you still want interval training to raise your FDP to be able to hold that power for longer steady, but you want steady also.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think that for bikes, I think that gravel bikes are going to go through a really rapid period of evolution over the past 2 weeks. What we've seen from Keegan is, I know, gotten a lot of product managers like rethinking things with running.
Why is that?
With running mountain bike tires on their gravel bike and doing like full-on mountain bike tires, like really, really wide ones, running prototype wide wheels that work with those mountain bike tires, or Zip's new really wide wheels that they've released. It's going to change things. And I really do think that we're going to have one off-road bike in the future for like those that race cross-country and gravel. It's going to be that XC race bike of like 120-ish millimeters of travel. It's all going to be managed via things like flight attendant, and then you'll just have a different pair of bars and shifters. And that's it. And that's all you'll have to do. You'll just swap it over. And I think that that's going to be the faster bike for people. And as a result, I bet that we'll see XC bikes get aerodynamic like changes to them. They're going to start to optimize for that. And I also think that we're going to get like suspension systems that are going to be aimed toward being lighter, and because the frames are already very light, but the suspension systems and everything else. So I'm excited because that means that we're going to get faster bikes, lighter bikes, everything.
I wonder, I mean, I love this idea for bike companies. Having two product lines merge into one product line isn't the best business idea. But if somebody does it, everyone's going to have to follow, right? Because how much nicer would it be just to have a bike that could do both gravel and mountain bike racing?
And I think that flight attendant really makes that possible. Those sort of things, those like automated suspension systems. If you didn't have that,
you're right.
It wouldn't be possible. And I think that's the dam is broken now, and it's like it's pretty clear to see where it's all going to go from it.
Yeah, some smaller brand will probably do it first. But this is the integrated one, and everyone's going to have to follow. John, next time, if you want, you can borrow Chamois Hagar for these races. Sitting there in the office.
The size XL or 2XL.
Ready.
Yeah.
It's got a dropper post. You're fine.
It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is there. I'm not sure I would. I had an awesome time at this race. the gravel bug did not bite me whatsoever. Like, I have not gone to one bike website since this race and like thought about gravel bikes. I still enjoy mountain biking and road racing and road riding so much more. But I think that the thing I like most of all out of everything is what races like this are doing for cycling. Because it's pretty awesome when you see over 3,000 cyclists go to this super small place in the middle of the country, all taking on this awesome goal. And also like and this could be because of the event or everything else, but everyone is just, they're nice. They're having fun. It's like supportive. It's awesome. And so I think that like gravel is incredible for the sport. Yeah. And so again, if I, when we joke around about me not liking gravel, it's not because I don't like what gravel does for the sport. It's just, I would rather be riding other things.
Take this perspective. John loves riding so much that if like there's 1 through 10, mountain biking's like a 45 for him.
Yeah.
Gravel's like a 12. I've been on with him too. He's like, this is amazing. I'm so glad I get to do this. He takes out his camera. He takes pictures. Yeah. He's like smiling the whole time. He's happy afterwards. And he's just like, but that wasn't mountain biking. That's it's not like he really doesn't like it. Like working in a cubicle or something. He truly does love it.
The high I
that's
get
why
from
he's
mountain
flying
biking
to
is simply
Colorado.
unmatched. It's just unmatched.
You're addicted. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. It's just so good. Yeah. I love it.
And that's what he's comparing to, right?
That's right. Yeah. But it was awesome. And thank you so much to all of you, seeing you out there at the race. It was great. I did not get in. We aren't promoting SBT or anything, by the way. I went through the lottery and everything else. I even paid extra. I paid for the black course, which was $25 more. And then I changed to the blue course, which I had to pay $22 to change to the course. So I'm a great customer for SBT. I paid a lot of money because I even paid for like their lottery thing. But so this is not promoting the race.
Like 100,000 listens a week. That also... That's a big, like a normal podcast cost. That's a lot of money to spend.
Yeah, exactly. So I just
25.
Want to be clear. They didn't offer us anything or anything else like that. And it was just doing the race and wanted to share with you guys. So, but Nate, we've got something that we want to talk about on the product. 2 things actually. Like I said before, on the open rides thing is what we call it internally, but really it's just group rides and solo rides. You can go into whatever training plan that you have, and on whatever day, you can change that to be a group ride or a solo ride.
How much time do we have left?
We've gone long. I mean, it's already like an hour 16, but I want to talk.
I kind of want to go. Yeah, maybe we can hit a little bit of it and then talk about it more, because I want to go deeper into weight training, and I want to give some do a really good what is the current research about weight training and how I think we can then strength training for cyclists, and how you can integrate it into your plan. But on this one, 2 parts. You go into Plan Builder, you build your plan. A big question we have is that, well, what if Saturday's your group ride? There's a workout on Saturday. What happens if I don't do that? Is it going to mess up? How's adaptive training going to handle that? And what you can do is you can set your preference inside of it when you build your plan. And you can have a preference where on Saturdays, there's a hard interval day. You can say, actually, that one's going to be a group ride, which is fine. And maybe Sunday, that endurance ride, I'm actually going to do that endurance ride as a solo ride outside. Not even a workout, just a solo ride. We're going to give you a wattage target to hit on that solo ride. Adaptive training is going to read it back in, and then we're going to change your plan for it. You're going to do your group ride. We're going to read that data back in. We're going to change your plan for it. We're going to give you an extra rest day, or we're going to have adaptive training turn the workout down and give you an easier day if you need to be, if you go too hard. But that's going to, your whole plan, adaptive training is going to read into it. I'm going to stop saying red light, green light, hopefully, and just talk about adaptive training, giving you rest days, red days, or an easier day on a yellow day, because I think I've confused it with too many buzzwords. It's really all it's some of these internal product names, and we say them on the podcast, but really it's just our adaptive training system is going to look at your data and then prescribe you rest or an easier day based on that. So the ability here now is you don't have to worry about, what if it says I should be doing, threshold intervals, but I do a group ride, perfectly fine. Going to read it in, adjust your plan. Mm-hmm. You can also do it if you're live in a plan right now. You can click on it on the calendar, go to the website. There's a little button here that says your plan name. And you can then say, hey, on these future Saturdays, I want to make them all group rides. That'll take into account. Just make sure you're riding outside with the power meter. If you use a heart rate monitor, there will be adjustments made, but not as big as if you used a power meter, not as accurate.
That's right. This is something really cool too that happens. Like Nate said, let's say Saturday was a hard interval day. That's what you're supposed to have, but you want to do a group ride. if you look at it, it will actually give you a suggestion on how to approach that group ride. And that would be different than, let's say, if Saturday was supposed to be just like, an endurance day that you were supposed to do. In that case, it's going to give you different instructions on how to approach it. Just like, like a world-class coach would. It's awesome.
There's a gravel group ride, and then there's the drop ride, hammer ride. And you can look at those instructions. Hopefully you can line those up. But that Sunday could be a group gravel ride. That's a 4-hour fun ride, or it could be a shootout in Arizona where it is like, I don't know, he's dropped right away, but that's kind of a solo ride for me.
Turns into one real quick. Yeah. It's just awesome because I think a lot of us have always felt like in training outside of TrainerRoad, even that group rides and those like soul fulfilling rides that we do, that are those solo rides that we go out and do, that those stand at odds with training. And in this case, with TrainerRoad, you don't have to have that. It's all packed into one. You can train and race and ride how you want, and then adaptive training takes care of things for you. And that's the whole vision here, is that it's taking care of things for you. You don't have to worry about that. It's awesome.
The other big update is that we are bringing in, before we were just bringing in cycling and running, just about every other sport type that you can think of from Strava. We went in and we did like 99% of them. I think like curling, there's like some really weird curling, badminton. We didn't bring those in. We still bring them in, but we didn't do the added extra detail on them. But swimming, hiking, skiing,
yoga, strength training, the big one.
Stuff like that. So strength training, I'll get into that in a second, but those are now brought in, and adaptive training then looks at those with the amount of data that you give us and then adjusts your plan accordingly, which is amazing. And that's something that we've been striving for a long time. And, we're constantly improving as a company. And this is a big improvement for those who do a lot of other activities. Really interesting. I looked at baselines of like how much stress people are doing just last week versus just cycling people versus cycling people with all the other activities. And I looked at it's a histogram of distribution of how much work they're doing. And what's really interesting is that the shape of the two is the same, meaning that like overall, the amount of work that someone can do is the same. It's just, are you going to give it to cycling? Are you going to give it to running? Are you going to give it to skiing? Like I think that also shows it shows how well we're doing of measuring all that other stuff. But there's not a different in distributions. And it just shows too, as an athlete, there's just so much you can do. And when you start loading other stuff up, it does impact the amount of cycling stress you can do. So a lot of us think that, start recording those activities so we can read them in. We're heart rate monitors where you can, where appropriate. And you have to take into account of your plan because it really does impact the total amount of stress you can do. And you're going to start missing days.
This reminds me of a good analogy for this, Nate, is when a lot of people start food tracking, they don't realize, they think of their meals as where they get their calories. And then when they step back and look at it, they're like, oh my gosh, I have 7 snacks throughout the day, but we never count those 7 snacks. Or it's like, oh, it's the dressing. I didn't realize how much the dressing changed everything. Or like, it's the small little things. And a lot of the time what we think about, because we focus on the training on our bike, that's all we're focused on. And we don't even recognize the strain that we get from all the other activities that we do. So it's really important, if you can give that to adaptive training, it can take care of all that measuring and calculating and figuring out for you. So then you don't have to deal with the stress. All you have to do is just record it, upload it to Strava or Garmin Connect, and then it shows right up in your calendar and on TrainerRoad, and it handles everything for you.
And the amazing thing now is we're bringing in strength training, right? And strength training is a little different. Strength training normally isn't an aerobic exercise, right? It's not like everything kind of else that we do here. And what we do is we bring it in and we're asking you how many working sets you're doing. Now, that helps us record it. And I know Garmin's like it can record some sets for you and record what kind of exercise. I've had zero luck with that being accurate.
Yeah.
And we've looked at other files too. It's not accurate enough for us to trust it inside of adaptive training to like learn off of that, of what you're doing. So we're asking is that once you do it, you're going to tell us how many working sets you have for upper body, lower body, full body, or core. And now full body would be something like maybe squats. You can put that in lower body or full body. They're going to kind of be weighed equally. Upper body workouts, and core like abs and stuff like that. If you have a question, there will be a link inside the product, and we'll send you to a page that has some FAQs about, hey, are deadlifts full body or upper body or lower body? Where should I put them? I'm guessing those are going to be full body inside of there, but it's not going to make that big of a deal. Now, working sets are warm-up sets. This is what strength training, the word on
how they speak about it.
Teach a little bit.
Yep.
Let's speak about it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's warm-up sets where you're not going to, it's not really that taxing, right? And this is, you're warming up your muscles, your ligaments, your joints. You're making it so you're not going to get injured later on. A working set, all I'm going to say is those are going to be hard sets, okay? And by tracking that, then we can update adaptive training. Somebody's asked me, well, what if I don't want to go hard? Is this feature not for me? I mean, honestly, yeah. If you're just like, I'm going to lift this, I'm holding a Stanley water cup 10 times. I go, oh, I did 10 bicep, curls, because that's not close. It's not doing the physical adaptations. The damage in your muscle is not happening. Therefore, the stress and recovery is not happening. Therefore, we don't want to record it as that to be able to change your training plan.
When you do strength training, if you're doing intentional strength training that's really like pushing limits, getting toward failure, that sort of thing, this part of the feature is for you to go in and add in your working sets. If you don't do strength training that's that measured, that's going to that difficulty, if you don't even do strength training that's really organized into these like lower body sets or something else, and you're doing more like cardio blended sort of strength-ish training that you're doing, you probably don't have to worry about this. Instead, it'll just show that you have strength training on your calendar. Adaptive training will assume that you did strength training and it knows how to adjust from there. I think maybe one of the coolest parts about all this, Nate, is the novelty factor that goes in with this too. And I think that that's an important thing for like people to know with this. Like if you show up and you haven't done a hike and like you're a cyclist and you're super diligent with that, then all of a sudden you throw in a 4-hour hike that you did. Adaptive training is going to know that's like, whoa, hey, this is novel for this person. And it's going to make a unique adjustment compared to if you hike every week at that level. It knows that that's something that you're used to. So that's something that's a really cool thing to keep in mind with this, is that it's not just some sort of like templated boilerplate, pull a number from a table and then put it in there. It's analyzing. It knows the context of your training, and it's just super cool.
And you got to respond to us too. So if you're going to do something that's more of like an aerobic workout, mark it as a different type of activity, whatever makes most sense inside of like Strava, and wear a heart rate strap and do that. But like if it's a Zumba class or something, don't call that strength training, even though you have like weights in your hand. You're like, I did 100 sets. That's not the same.
Well, everybody, thanks so much for listening to this episode. And we're going to be doing an episode coming soon. We're doing an episode where we dive deep into research. It's going to be a really cool one. We'll do another one on strength training coming up very soon. Another one where we answer all the questions that you've been submitting. We have some great ones, and you can do that at trainerroad.com/podcast, or on Spotify. You can drop in your questions there now, which is pretty cool. There's comments that you can leave, which is awesome. So you can go and do that. And if you want to help out TrainerRoad here, you can sign up for TrainerRoad. You can tell your friends to sign up for TrainerRoad, and you can share this podcast or rate the podcast. The more people that do that every week, the more people find the podcast later on. We appreciate you all. You're all awesome. Have fun getting faster with TrainerRoad this week. We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.